All right, this video is going to be a little bit intense because this video is what I would tell my younger self who wanted to get to the Division 1 level. And I'm going to outline the exact step-by-step process of how you can become a Division 1 pitcher. But since I'm going to be talking to my younger self, it's going to be like I'm holding him by the shirt and being like, why did you do all these dumb things? Listen to me right now. If I could go back into the future and talk to him, this is what I would say. If you're wondering if I'm credible to talk about something like this to get you to the Division 1 level, I was recruited by some of the schools that you probably want to get to. I got an offer from my dream school, Stanford University. I went to visits to some big time places, most of the Pac-12 schools back in the day, LSU, a lot of these big time universities, right? And we've helped a bunch of guys get to the Division 1 level at the Pitcher Lab. And so this is a 3-step process that I would follow if I could start over. Now, the first is to understand that baseball and getting recruited to a Division 1 basically means that you're in a competitive marketplace. Everyone wants to get to the Division 1 level these days, and so it's so hard to get to that level. But that's something that most players don't understand, is that how hard it is to get to the Division 1 level, right? To get to the Division 1 level, by default, you need to be at the top 1%, right? If you think about it like this, right? And let's just say this is the Division 1 players. Out of all high school players, right? Only this amount of players are going to get to the Division 1 level, right? And by default, this is where the majority lives. And the majority is not Division 1 players, right? And so you have to be in the top percentage to get to the Division 1 level, and your work has to reflect that. And the simple fact is, you're not putting in the work that is required to get the top percentage, right? You just think that, oh, I'm just gonna follow my high school workouts. My high school team is pretty good pitching coach. I'm just gonna follow that, and hopefully I become a Division 1 player, right? That's how the 99% is thinking, right? And that's what holds you back from getting to the Division 1 level, because just by doing this, right? If you're doing the normal stuff and if you're following your team stuff, by default, right? You're gonna be here because you're doing nothing different to what everyone else is doing. If I look at all the players on a high school team, right? Maybe one will get to the Division 1 level, right? Unless you're at a super powerhouse high school. And so if only one out of that whole team is going to the Division 1 level and you're doing what everyone else is doing, by default, you're not going to go to the Division 1 level. And this is what I experienced, and this is why this is the first point, is because I was a guy, right? I was in Sydney, Australia, just following what the team gave me. I thought the coaches and the pitching coaches cared about me enough to make sure that these programs, right, are going to get me to the next level. But the truth is, they don't care. They really don't care. Nothing happens to their lives, right, if you don't get to the Division 1 level. They don't care as much as you do. Okay, and so you have to take control of your own career and do what is needed to get to the top percent, because no one else is going to help you. No one is going to come and save you. Your pitching coach isn't just going to be out of nowhere, hey, you know what, I really like you. I'm going to make it my life's mission to get you to the Division 1 level. I mean, if you have a pitching coach like that, then that's awesome. The thing about it is that they don't care about you. They're too worried about themselves, right, and their own lives to care about you. And this is just a human thing. I'm not saying anything bad about anyone, but what I'm saying is that you need to take control of your own career and actually think about it, right? And be like, okay, what do I need to do to get to the 1%, to the top percentage, right? And what you need to do is to do what everyone else isn't doing and put in the top 1% of work, right? And I'm not talking about work harder here, right? When I started to think about this, right? And I was like, okay, if I need to get to the Division 1 level, I need to be putting in and working harder than everyone else, right? But baseball is a game of efficiency, all right? So you can't just work harder and get more results. Right? I'll give you an example. My co-founder, Alberto's Barber, he came to this realization where, okay, I need to put in the top 1% of work to get to the top 1%, which is the right thing to think, right? But what he concluded back in the day was that he would just work harder than everyone else. And so he worked out 3 times a day. I'm not even joking. He would do like a lower body, upper body, max effort throwing, and he would just continue that every single day, right? And obviously what happened? He got injured. Because baseball isn't a game of work hard. It's about working smart and efficiently. Okay, so basically what you need to do is to do the right stuff, right? With the limited amount of training economy that you have so that you can maximize each training session. Now, this is ultimately gonna lead you to do something different, right? Everyone else is gonna be here, right? They're gonna be doing their team workouts, whatever. And then because you wanna be in the top 1%, you're gonna be doing something different. So you're gonna be somewhere over here doing your own thing, right? But what stops you from doing this is fear, right? Fear of getting judged, fear of missing out, or fear of not being part of the team, right? If everyone else is doing their thing, right? And then you go off and do like some crazy workout, like some plyo ball stuff. Back in the day when I was training, plyo balls were a very new thing, right? Now it's a lot more mainstream. It's not weird to be doing plyos. Back in the day, everyone was, just playing catch, just warming up. And then I would go out and do some crazy plyo ball workouts and everyone's like, dude, Josh is so weird. Why is he doing that? Like, bro, he's such a weirdo. And that's what stops a lot of people. And I felt that, right? I didn't want to be that weirdo. But my desire to be in this top 1% was stronger than my fear of being weird. Right? Baseball rewards the brave. The braver you are, the higher level you're going to be able to get. Right? And so if you're too scared to be this guy, right? Then I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're not going to make it. Because you can't be thinking about what everyone else is thinking if you want to be in the top percent. Because if you're too worried about what other people are thinking and you're like, I don't want to be that weirdo, and you come back here, then what's going to happen? You're going to be in the masses again and you're going to get nowhere, right? Because 99.9% of high school players get nowhere. It's just the fact, it's just math, right? We're in a competitive marketplace. Division ones are looking for the top percent. They're not looking for the masses. And so if you're too scared to be this guy, then it's never going to work out. Now you're probably wondering, okay, so if I need to be super efficient, what do I actually need to be doing? And so what I see a lot these days, right, is there's a lot of social media, there are a lot of general programs from high schools, colleges that don't apply to you by default, right? Social media content, and I'm at fault for this as well because I make a lot of social media content, but they are aimed for the masses, right? They're not aimed at you to help you in your individual situation. And so social media content doesn't apply to you. These high school programs that are meant for 30 pitches isn't the best one for you. And so what you need, individual advice. Someone who can give you advice in your specific situation because baseball is so individualized, right? And now when you come up with a plan that is right for you, right? And you know exactly what to be doing to maximize your situation, that's when you're going to be putting in the 1% work. Right? And you're not going to be with the masses. The second thing I need you to realize is that you're not that good. And this is with 2 scenarios, right? The first one is skill-wise. You are not that good, especially if you're watching this, right? You are not that good, right? And what I mean by this is when you compare yourself against the people around you, right? You might feel like you're one of the better players. But if you look at who is actually at the Division 1 level and the graph that I was showing at the top 1%, if you compare yourself against them, you're going to realize that you're not that good, right? This is what I experienced because I grew up in Sydney, Australia, right? And so if I was throwing in the low 80s, that was considered gas, and I was one of the better players in Australia. And so I was kind of feeling myself, I was like, dude, I'm up to 88, like 17 years old, dude, I'm the man. But then when I realized, I'm trying to get to the Division 1 pitcher, I'm competing against these guys who are going to the Division 1s, and I looked at this game called Perfect All-American Game. And what I found was everyone was throwing 93, 94 miles an hour. And so this was an eye-opening experience for me because it taught me that I'm just not that good and there's so much more work to do, right? What I see so many times is you get too complacent. Because you're the best pitcher on your team, you're getting complacent. You're like, oh, I'm the best pitcher on the team. I don't need to work that hard. Bro, you're not that good. You actually suck compared to the general mass. I don't care if you're 88, 90 as a senior, right? The elite guys are 95 plus as a senior. Okay, so you're competing against them, right? You're not competing against your high school team where everyone throws 75, right? And so that's the number one thing that you need to realize. And also, you're not that good in terms of your knowledge. Now, this is something that holds so many players back, and it's what held me back. We have this illusion because we are, looking at all this social media content, all of this stuff. We have a pitching coach who, taught us the right way to do things. And we feel like we have so much knowledge to where we can figure it out on our own and do it ourselves. This is what I fell into when I was a 16-year-old throwing 78 miles an hour. And I'm like, look, I'm a pretty smart guy. I went to the best high school in Sydney, right? Which is a big city. I went to the best one. So I had this illusion that, okay, I'm pretty smart. I'm going to figure it out. Okay, and so I did all the research. I watched all this content, created a full program for myself, and I tried to execute it, right? And what happened was I started doing these crazy workouts, right? And I was changing different things every single week. At one point I was squatting every day because I saw this program called the Squat Every Day program. I was trying every single program that I saw on the bodybuilding.com forums, right? Any new time I saw like a new mechanical fix, I was changing it, right? And I literally got nowhere. Maybe I got to the low 80s, right? But it just held me back for so long because the brutal truth is, it is so hard to coach yourself. You probably don't know as much as you think you might. There's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? And basically what the Dunning-Kruger effect says is that the less you know about something, the more you think you know about something. We've all seen the guy who, claims to be this baseball pitching expert, right? But once you start talking to them, you know that they're really not. But in their mind, they think they're an expert. And why this is because they don't know what they don't know, right? If I were to talk to them about, okay, so let's talk about, velocity development and all the mechanical things that go into it, right? They wouldn't know any of that stuff because they haven't been exposed to it, right? But in their mind, they have this illusion that they're super knowledgeable and they know everything about the subject. Right? They've fallen into the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is they think they're smarter than they are. Okay, and this is an illusion that so many players fall into, is that they don't know what they don't know, right? And so with their limited knowledge, right, with a small amount of knowledge, they think they're gonna be the one guy who's able to figure it out and get to the top percentage. Chances are you're not gonna be that guy who's gonna figure it out, right? And be that one guy who's able to train themselves and get to the top percentage of players, right? Because you're competing against all of these guys. And a lot of these guys, right? You're competing against guys who have so many resources. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? Baseball is an expensive sport. And so the more resources you have, the higher chance you have of getting to the next level, right? A lot of these guys, and I've talked to so many of them, have a lot of money to be able to spend on gaining the knowledge, getting the best coaching, getting the best equipment, facilities, everything like that. So you're competing against these guys. And if you're not a guy who has a bunch of resources, then you're gonna get outcompeted by these guys every single time. But here's the good news. It's not like you need a dad who's a multi-millionaire, right? You don't even need the help of your parents, right? For myself, this was something that held me back. I didn't have a bunch of resources. And so I was like, you know what? I want to go to the US and get good training, but it's just too expensive. And the biggest thing that helped me was a mindset shift. And so when I started to think about, okay, how can I get access to this stuff, right? then I was able to come up with many solutions. Okay, so I was a 16-year-old throwing 78 again, and I wanted to get access to this, right? And obviously this was in the US, it was at the best facilities, remote coaches, stuff like that. It cost a lot of money. And so rather than making the excuse of, oh, I don't have money, I can't afford it, because that is a loser mindset, right? If you have that mindset, then you're just gonna be stuck in here. Like there's nothing about it. Unless you're extremely, extremely talented, right? And you're genetically gifted, you're not gonna be able to get into the top 1% without getting access to some type of specific knowledge as well, individualized knowledge. Again, it can't just be free content that you're seeing online and then thinking that you're getting access to the best stuff. Because again, and I know this because I make content just like this. We do our best to put out the best content that we can, but obviously when we give individual specific advice to an athlete, it's completely different to what we put out online, right? That's why I tell my athletes at the Pitch Lab, hey, ignore everything I say on social media because none of that applies to you. None of that is going to help you. Just follow the things that we give you. And so going back to this example, right? There are a bunch of guys who have the resources to get access to the knowledge to get better, right? And whoever thinks that, they're able to do it without these resources are going to be here. Unless they're genetically talented and, super gifted, whatever. The guys who are thinking about, oh, I don't have the resources, I'm poor, I don't have the money, it's just a loser mindset, to be brutally honest. And I can say this because I had the exact same mindset, right? And it got me nowhere. And honestly, the guys who have this mindset, I've, seen and talked to so many players, 99.9% of them are gonna stay here and go nowhere because that's just not the mindset of the top percentage of guys, right? The mindset of the top percentage of guys who get to the Division I professional level is, okay, I don't have the resources, but how can I get them, right? How can I actually do the things to get the resources, to get access to what I need to get to the top 1%, right? And so that is the mindset shift that changed everything for me. I remember my dad saying, hey, look, this is not something that we can afford, but I have an idea for you. And I was like, okay, so what is it? He was like, just go fundraise to go achieve your dreams, right? And I was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you can just go fundraise. And so what I basically did was I went to a bunch of shopping malls, right? And I had like this big sign that said, hey, I'm trying to achieve my goals, right? But I need money, right, to be able to do it. And so I walked around and asked every single shop if I could get a gift, right? A gift so that it could be entered into a raffle to where I could sell raffle tickets to people, right? So that, and that would be the fundraiser, right? And so I went around every single shop. I got a big bag of things. You'd be surprised the amount of things that some shops will give. I got some good stuff. The biggest one was like a really nice Lego set. I was like, damn, this is like $200. Like, this is awesome. And then so I set that all aside, right? And then that became the prize of the raffle that I held. And so every single weekend, again, I went out to these shopping malls and I just stood there and approached each person. Hi, I'm trying to do this thing. Would you be able to support me? Here's a raffle that you can buy, and here are all the prizes that you might be able to win. And I sold them for like $5 each, right? And at the end of it, I had raised $5,000, enough to fund a trip for me to go to Driveline Baseball back in the day when it was like the best place ever, right? Every single coach back then that was coaching is at like a top MLB pitching coach now. Now it's not the same. But back in the day, it was the best place. That's where all the knowledge, right, was. That's where I needed to get to the top percentage, right? And so I was able to do that, right? Another example is my co-founder who literally sold his car to be able to go to the same place, and that's where I met him, to gain access to this knowledge to become a top 1% player, right? And so I don't have any sympathy for someone who is like, hey, I'm super interested in training with you guys. What's the cost? And I tell them, and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. And I just know at that point that this player isn't serious, right? They're not serious enough about their goals, right? Because if it's something that they really believe will help them, it would become, okay, how would I be able to make that work? Rather than, oh, it's just too expensive, I'm just going to try to figure it out on their own. Because 99% of those players, again, are going to be here and get nowhere, right? It's just the brutal truth. It's just the brutal truth of baseball. You're competing against guys who have unlimited resources, have a bunch of resources, right? They're getting access to all this knowledge and they're continuously getting better. It's like this loop where they're getting better, getting better, getting better. Have you ever seen the guys who are sons of big leaguers and they're just absolute studs, right? It's because they're in this loop of they have unlimited resources. Even their dad is a huge resource, right? And they're getting all this knowledge, they're doing the right stuff, and then they just keep getting better and better and better and better and better. While you are stuck here trying to figure it out on your own, you have no access to the actual knowledge that you need, right? And you're watching free content thinking that that's going to get you to the next level and, feeling sorry for yourself because your family isn't rich. I know that's brutal, but that was me. And that's why I'm saying this stuff, okay? And so that is the second one, is that you're not that good and you're not that knowledgeable. You need to gain the knowledge required to get to the top 1% because, again, baseball is a game of efficiency and knowing exactly the right things to do rather than just working as hard as you can. So the last point is that you don't have time. Okay, this is the last thing that holds so many players back from getting to the Division 1 level, which is they think they have so much time, right? If you look at this, right, this is your timeline of like your life, right? And you only have this window to get good enough to get to the Division 1 level, right? Most players might start training seriously at 15, if you're lucky, maybe it's like 13, 14 years old, right? But then you have to get recruited by the time you're like 17 years old these days, as a junior in high school, or if you're in college, right, it might be when you're like 20 years old, right? And so you have this small window of 3 to 5 years. And it goes back to my previous point of you just don't have the knowledge, right? And even if you're a guy who's able to figure it out, right, and get yourself to be good enough to be a Division 1 pitcher, it's going to take you so long. Right? And I know this because I tried this. I experimented with every single program and it took me way longer than it should have to actually achieve my goals to be a Division 1 caliber level pitcher, right? Time is a very, very scarce resource in baseball. The younger you are, the more valuable you are, right? Even in professional baseball, the younger you are, the more value you have, right? That's why the guys who come from the Dominican who are, 16 years old, who are, absolute beasts, they are the most valuable because they have the most projectability. If you're 22 these days in Pro Bowl, you're old, right? And so time is a very, very scarce resource. And this goes back to my point of baseball is an efficiency game rather than doing more game, okay? And so you need to be able to do the right stuff in this tiny window, right? Either one of these to get to where you want to go. Now, the trap that younger players fall into and what I fell into was thinking that, hey, I have time. I'm young, I have time. And this is reinforced by everyone around them. Coaches, parents tell you, hey man, you have time, man. Just chill out, you have time. But I'm here to tell you that you don't have time. You need a sense of urgency to get better, right? You need a sense of urgency of like, okay, I'm gonna take control of my career, right? Right now, as a low-level college guy, high school guy, JUCO guy, whoever's watching this right now, you need to take control of your career like right now, right? Because you don't have time. You're not going to be that young pitcher for long, right? I still remember this to this day when one of my mentors told me, and I was 16, 17 years old, and I told him, I'm young, right? Like I still have time to gain velo and throw hard and, become a recruitable prospect. And he looked me dead in the eye and it was like, Yeah, but that's not going to last long. You're not going to be that young guy for very long, right? Because 1-2 years down the line, you're already a guy who's a junior, senior in high school, or you're already a guy who's a junior, senior in college, and your time is running out, right? And so you need some urgency with a lot of this stuff. You don't have time to be messing around and thinking that you're young and taking it easy, right? A lot of this, to get to the top 1%, right, to become a Division I type pitcher, there are risks involved, right? There are certain risks involved to become an elite caliber pitcher. You can't just play it safe and get there, right? You do need to take some risks. You do need to, okay, maybe it's like I see this all the time. It's like, oh, I don't want to do high intent throwing because, or pliable is because it might get me injured, right? And I'm here to tell you, anything can get you injured, right? If you do it the wrong way, or, sometimes you just get really unlucky and you get injured, right? But if you're too scared of getting injured to actually take action, then you're never going to make it to the top levels, right? There are risks involved with everything. And so that is something that you have to take on and accept and be like, look, I'm good with the risk because I want to achieve my goals. And I understand that 99.9% of players are not going to achieve that goal, right? It's a very, very hard thing to do to become a Division I pitcher. And so there are going to be risks involved, and I'm okay with that. That needs to be the mindset, okay? And the risk can be anything. The risk could be investing into your career, right? For me to invest into my career and go to Seattle, Washington, where that was, and spend all of that money, that was a huge risk for me because that was all of the money that I had at the time, right? Albertus, my co-founder, he took a massive risk by selling his car and going to Seattle, Washington Driveline to get better, right? Another risk might be that you're putting your body through a lot, right? With the lifting stuff, with the throwing stuff, it's a lot for your body to become an elite athlete. There's a risk there. There are risks of, time. You're actually investing a lot of your time into this. You're putting a lot of your time, effort, energy into this, and it might not pan out. That's a risk as well. There are many risks that are involved to get to the highest level, and you just have to be okay with that. Okay, you need to accept that. Because the matter of fact is, you're trying to be an elite guy, right? And be separated from everyone else. And that comes with its own risks. So I know I talked a lot about stuff that isn't actually actionable, right? And so I want to give you actionable steps to actually become a Division I pitcher, because this is what I would have followed if I could start all over again, right? And so the first step is to decide if you even want to become a Division I pitcher. All of the things that we just talked about, right? You need to take that into consideration. You need to take into the consideration of, okay, am I willing to be that weird guy? Do things that others aren't willing to do and be a top 1% guy? Am I willing to take on that risk, right? Am I willing to take on, financial, time, body, physical risk, right? Is that something that you even want to do? This is going to be a very stressful thing. This is going to be one of the hardest things that you do to become a top 1% guy, right? And so the first thing is to decide. And there's no shame in being like, look, I love baseball, I just want to have fun, and this isn't for me. If that is you, then it makes everything easier because you can disregard all of this stuff, right? You can go watch my other videos and experiment with all of the things and be in the middle of the pack, right? Like we just talked about. If you're fine with being in the middle of the pack, right, then that's what I would do. And that's totally, totally fine, right? But I'm talking to the guys who want to be in the top 1%, right? Because those are the guys that we love to work with. And so if that is you, you need to make sure that you're prepared to do all of the things that turn you into a top percentage athlete. Because if you're going to half-ass it, then you're just going to be straight back here, right? But if you are prepared to do it and you decide, hey, this is something I'm going to do. This is something that I've always wanted to do. I want to get to the Division I player. I want to be a Division I pitcher. This is something that I'm gonna look back on my life and be very, very proud of, because that is something I look back on that I'm very, very proud of myself, right? To go from a 16-year-old throwing 78 miles an hour and developing myself to be able to compete with the top percentage of players and get an offer from my dream Division I school, which was Stanford, right? And I was able to accomplish that. That's something that I am very, very proud of. The first step is to decide. The second step is to get access to the knowledge that you think you need, okay? That will help you out as much as possible, okay? And so what I'm talking about with this is coaching, right? If you're trying to become a top 1% player, then you can't be figuring it out all on your own. We've already talked about that. You need to get help from people who have already done this and helped others get to that next level, right? And I'm not saying this to be like, hey, join us. It's whoever you think will help you out the most, right? Because belief is going to be the number one thing that's going to help you. Okay, so the last step after you have access to the knowledge is to execute relentlessly, right? When you have these two things, now all you need to do is execute, but you need to pour your heart into this, right? You need to obsess over this stuff, right? Even if you have both of these things, you need to be able to line it up with the third one or it's not going to work. We all know that kid who has unlimited resources, right? They have the best coaching, facilities, everything like that, but they just don't execute. They're too lazy, they don't want to put in the work, and they go nowhere, right? And so for you to become a top 1% pitcher, you need to have all three of these aligned to get there, right? And notice that I didn't talk about any specific training exercises or programs, right, for you to get here, because by default, right, social media and content is aimed at the masses, right? Like we've talked about. And so it's not going to apply to you. Even though it might not seem like the most actionable advice, right? This is the best thing that I can give you, because if you can do these three things and everything I talked about in this video, then you're going to develop yourself into a Division I pitcher. And you're not going to get there if I was going to give you a generic program that was aimed at the masses. This is what I would have told my younger self, a 16-year-old throwing 78 miles an hour with big dreams of trying to get to the Division I level. This is the video that I would send to him for him to be able to get to the Division I level. And so if you're a guy who actually wants to get to this top 1% and feel like we can help you at the Pitcher Lab, then the first link below, you can book a call with me and we can actually talk about it. Or if you're a guy who is fine being here, right? Then you can continue to go watch a bunch of YouTube videos, my YouTube videos, and stay in the middle of the pack. But don't complain about being in the middle of the pack and not being a Division I pitcher, because I did warn you.